Welcome back, everyone, to Web3 Unpacked. And today we are happy to have Matt Bell, founder and CEO of Turbofish, the creator of Nomic, a layer 1 blockchain which offers decentralized, non-custodial Bitcoin bridge that allows users to use BTC across the cosmos. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, Rich. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. We're excited to get into this conversation. And just a little backstory here on Matt. You've got a really cool background. Matt, you're OG BTC in crypto, having started with SafeBit, which is one of the first digital wallets, which is really cool. You did that in 2012.
Yeah.
So you've been around the block, and you've worked with Tendermint, which is a really big deal, as an early employee contributing to the growth of the Cosmos. So you were there day one, kind of starting to build the foundations around Tendermint, which is, again, very cool. And then duly noted here, you actually co-founded a venture alongside of Vitalik Buterin, which we all know. Really cool. And you're from one of my favorite cities, Austin, Texas. I always like to give my Texas friends a shout out. Thanks for being here. We're going to get into it really quick because, I've been digging in and learning more about what Turbofish or Nomic does. And you have a couple of projects, which we'll probably touch on later on, which is really cool. One thing I love to ask my guests, everyone, in the beginning of our conversations is, how did you get into Web3? What was your journey? We talked a little bit about, your past, but really, what did it take to get you into it?
Yeah, that's a good question. For that, well, really, I have to think back to it. The term Web3 didn't even exist back then, for the same concepts of like what all of Web3 is, it was just, I guess it kind of starts from as a kid. Like, I don't know if you remember like the peer-to-peer file sharing era when there was like Napster and LimeWire and all those things, and like people were all downloading music. Like that was just sort of a fun time for me as a kid. And so like it got me really interested in peer-to-peer networks because that was so transformative for the music industry. I just thought like, wow, this is such a cool technology where it's not like everything else on the internet is just a bunch of big servers owned by big companies, but this is something where it's just people, like individuals, their computers interacting with other individuals' computers, around the world. And it just feels very internet native. So I just sort of was always fascinated by that. And then somehow I came across Bitcoin. I think I came across it on Wikipedia, just reading about peer-to-peer stuff in 2011. And to me, it was just like, oh, I guess that makes sense. Like that's another thing you can build with peer-to-peer technology. And, that was just the beginnings of blockchains. And so I was just always fascinated by that. I started getting into like online chat communities and stuff that were just talking about Bitcoin and, people talking about all the tech. And, I've just sort of followed it from that. And then eventually I got a job from people I'd met through those communities. At SafeBit, like you mentioned, where they were basically building the first multi-sig wallet back before that was even built into Bitcoin or anything. And from there, I just kind of, it just kind of stuck where I've been in the industry ever since. And
Your beginnings are very similar to a lot of others, including mine too. And it's funny you bring up Napster and LimeWire and stuff like that. I think we were all kind of indulging in those technologies back then. And it was funny because we all started using that, but we didn't realize we were using the first decentralized means of transacting, really.
right, yeah,
It wasn't monetary, but we were transacting in files and sharing things in packets across the internet, which was kind of mind blowing back then.
right, yeah.
And Yeah, right. And funny enough, you bring up Napster because one of my favorite interviews was with Jonathan Vlassopulos, who is now the new CEO of Napster. Right. So Napster is basically, reinventing, rebranding, and repositioning their whole Web3 strategy around a very entertainment inclusive and entertainment environment, which is really, really cool. I would check them out. It's part nostalgia and part, forward thinking entertainment industry.
Yeah, I
And
hadn't heard about that. That's really cool.
yeah, oh yeah, check it out. It's been in the works for a while, and they're starting to kind of drip out some some new stuff as they prepare to kind of launch in a big way. So definitely check them out. Jonathan has been on the circuit speaking at various conferences around the globe, actually, and he's an interesting guy. We both come from the Viacom MTV networks world. So it was a fun conversation. You should check out that episode. I'll link it in the description below. Um, all right, cool. So the other part of this question, Matt, is what does Web3, crypto, any of this world, blockchain, what does it mean to you personally? What does it offer you and maybe the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think to me, I mean, sort of going back to part of what I just said in the first question, I think a lot of people, there's all these Web3 things people see and people use, and, people are on Ethereum and using NFTs and doing all these things, but people people look at blockchain technology, but they forget that sort of what underpins it is peer-to-peer technology. And I feel like that's a good way to sort of visualize the core difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is that with Web 2, it's like there's two different classes of nodes on the network. There's servers and there's clients. So it's like you and your device on Web 2, it's like you're sort of like a small little node, whereas some big company runs some big node that's serving you, and like everything goes through that big node. But if it's peer to peer, then everyone's sort of on equal footing, and everyone, you're a peer with the other nodes that you're talking to. And so just taking that to the extreme, it means, there's not big central trusted authorities. It means, you sort of verify everything yourself on your device, so everything's governed by protocols. And so like that's just sort of an abstract way of saying, it just makes things fundamentally more fair. And I think that's really interesting because it's also just very native to how the internet works, where information is meant to just be shared around and not like owned by some central authority. So I think it's kind of an abstract answer, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see it very similar in a very similar fashion. The democratization of the interwebs. And ultimately, it all boils down to trust, right? The thing for me is, personally for me too, is the idea of not having to have intermediaries or anyone in between a decision between two parties.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
and using cryptography and technology, we're able to validate each other's decision making, ultimately resulting in a trusted bond or a trusted relationship. And if you ask me, what is the one thing missing from the world today? It's trust, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I think that's a really good way of saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, it's about, how do world wars start? How do, factions start? How do they're unhappy and they're unable to potentially trust another entity or organization or country or bank or whatever you may be. And that's a big part of what's missing. And if you actually start to bridge that gap and allow that to happen, wow, things would, one, move very fast, and two, people would just be a lot happier and a lot less stressed out if they don't have to deal with middlemen and potential theft, right? So when you have these direct connections, the grift and theft is pushed aside. So it's an interesting dynamic for sure. All right, let's jump into Turbofish, right? Why don't you give us a brief overview of Turbofish, and then we're going to probably dip into Nomic a little bit more because that's the heart and soul of what we want to talk about.
Right, yeah. So Turbofish is the company I founded with my friend Judd Keppel, and like I've been working with him for a long time, and we're sort of building this engineering team with the goal of just sort of building the next generation of blockchain technology. Since we've worked in the industry for so long, we've sort of seen the different sort of engineering trends come and go and the different sort of architectures people have explored for blockchains and Web3. And we have a lot of ideas of how we want things to be built and how we think things will be, how it'll all work in the future. And so we're just trying to build all that technology now. And we're all focused on the Rust programming language. So the name Turbofish is actually a term that comes from Rust, where it's like a certain part of the syntax where someone on Reddit first named it that because it's like colon colon angle bracket angle bracket. It just kind of looks like a little fish with like bubbles behind it or something like that. So we
Yeah.
like that name. It's also just sort of like a fun, catchy name. And so yeah, Turbofish. Yeah, we're focused on like right now we're contributing to Nomic, which is, see, I just want to point out, you'd said Nomic. Really, everyone we've talked to says Nomic, and like we're the only ones who say Nomic. And so it kind of feels like, this is like an open, decentralized thing. Like maybe it should just be Nomic and we should switch. But
That's funny. I apologize for mispronouncing it, but
no, like even
that's the
people
way I
who
read it.
who have like worked with the project for a long time, I feel like I'll say Nomic. So, and speaking of that, like maybe that's even what it's actually called because it's named after a game that this one economist and like legal philosopher first designed, where the point of the game was that part of the game is that you can change the rules of the game. And so we've just always liked that concept, that it's interesting that it can sort of become anything. It's like this entity where like as people participate in it, it can evolve and change into anything. And I think that makes a lot of sense in blockchain technology and Web3, where like a community will form a protocol and over time it'll just evolve as people change it. So yeah.
So, what would you say, Turbofish and Nomic? What problems are you solving? What problems are you solving for the general Rust development community?
Yeah, so we're making it really easy to build blockchain apps. So uh, we have some experience with this. We had first made this framework for Cosmos to write apps in JavaScript, making it really easy for developers to get started. So as opposed to using the Cosmos SDK in Go, where you sort of have to write a lot of code to do things, we've always liked making it really simple to get a lot done with very little code. And yeah, we've applied all those learnings to what we've worked on at Turbofish. So we've built our own framework from the ground up to build Cosmos chains, and it's called Orga. And so it's all in Rust, and it's just really easy to use. It focuses on making it feel like vanilla Rust. It's not like you have to learn some really complex framework. And then just the problem we want to solve is just making the best tools possible, like the tools that we want to use to build apps, and so that also includes making things really high performance, and yeah, just making it high performance and easy to use. So that's what Turbofish focuses on, and that's us and our team. But yeah, we're also contributing to Nomic, which what Nomic solves is essentially unlocking Bitcoin for all the possibilities of Web3 and DeFi, because there's so much Bitcoin that's just sitting around in wallets. You know, Bitcoin's always been really the strongest crypto asset. It's, you know, like it's never been passed up, even though it's the first one. Like right now, it's bigger than all other crypto combined. And but if you look at it, most people who hold Bitcoin, it's just there sitting in their wallet, not really doing anything. And so obviously there's demand for financial primitives, like if you would want to like borrow money against your Bitcoin or lend it out or whatever. And yeah, so Nomic really just aims to, it's a protocol that like the whole point is to bring Bitcoin into the sort of newer age of crypto.
Well said, Matt, because I think this type of what I would say connectivity is actually is really needed for a couple of reasons. Depending on your philosophy of investing, sharing, and maybe purchase power on Web3, generally the course I would take, and well, everyone takes now, is okay, I have a little bit of Bitcoin, you convert it to Ethereum or Solana, Sol, or any ADA, or whatever you want to convert it to. Then you go onto the chain you want to interact with that supports that particular coin or currency, and go from there. My theory is, Bitcoin is kind of a store of energy, and it's like the new gold standard. Everything is built on top of it, theoretically, not technically. And then you use Ethereum to kind of move about, right? Move about the chains, the cosmos, whatever protocol you're using at that point. And then you have to subsequently, flip or swap different things here and there to get your intended action completed. But it would be really interesting, and I think it's less from me, and I think it's an interesting tact to bring new users in and start to foster adoption within the greater Web3 universe, right? So that's really powerful, because a lot of people will be like, oh, I got Bitcoin. But you know what? A lot of people don't want to flip and swap and do all these little things that you and I do every day on our wallets or desktops or whatever we're doing. And it'll get them right into what they're doing very, very quickly.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Bitcoin, it's always been, I mean, it has the biggest brand, you know, like Ethereum's obviously big, but you know, people around the world, if they've heard of one cryptocurrency, it's probably Bitcoin, right? And it's also just the easiest to buy because it's so available, where, you know, you can just have Cash App and then in there you can buy Bitcoin. Or, you know, I'm sure around the world there's just so many solutions for getting into Bitcoin. And so people already just have it sitting there, or it's easy for them to get into it. Yeah, the part of the vision for Nomic is just, you know, people just send their Bitcoin from wherever they have it, whatever wallet they have it in, to a generated Bitcoin address. And then through that, it goes to, you know, wherever they're trying to use it, whether that's like an Ethereum account, a Cosmos account on any Cosmos chain, or, you know, some sort of special Bitcoin native contract or something like that. Yeah, Nomic just aims to make that step really easy.
and you guys go as far as to say that it actually could rival Ethereum, right? And when I hear like, oh, well, this whole system will rival Ethereum, well, you're harnessing the power of Bitcoin and just making it easier to kind of use that power across all of these different ecosystems. Um, yeah, and that's super super powerful because everyone, including myself, I shouldn't say everyone. I see Ethereum as the how do I put this? I see Bitcoin as a store of energy, but I see Ethereum as the actual pivot to do all of these activities, and then from there you can kind of obviously splinter in many different directions.
Yeah, the way I see it is I think Bitcoin DeFi can rival Ethereum, but also it doesn't have to. Like, there can be both where you can move Bitcoin to Ethereum, and obviously there's an ecosystem of, all these ways you can use that asset there already. But I do think, there can be this idea of sort of Bitcoin native DeFi where uh, it's all just sort of secured by the Bitcoin blockchain, even if it's built on layers on top of it. And I don't know. I don't like. I think we really can have both, and I think the rivalry is really just using Bitcoin as an asset, and that's the valuable part. Where it doesn't matter what platform that's happening on, but clearly, even in Ethereum DeFi, there's tons of demand for Bitcoin because there's $20 billion worth of TVL on Ethereum right now, and WBTC is over $5 billion. And so if you think about that, it's like on Ethereum, you have the choice of using ETH, which is the native token to the chain. There's no extra trust assumptions or anything. Or if you're using WBTC, that's an asset where it's really held custodially by a single company. And, if you had the choice between those, you wouldn't want to take the risk of having this custodian, but still a quarter of the value is, using this non-native asset through that custodial risk just because people want to use Bitcoin that much. And so I think if it was the choice between native Ethereum for these things and native Bitcoin, then I think Bitcoin would surpass Ethereum and, it would be a larger asset within DeFi.
Yeah, I mean, what you're doing is offering options, right? And I love you guys are taking, from what I'm hearing already, a very user experience approach to developing your products, which in turn will help other people develop products, right? And you're listening to your audience, and for you guys, it's nice because developers developing for developers. I mentioned some friends over that are operating on the Cosmos as well. Andromeda Protocol, they're listening to their developer audience, but taking it a step further and making it codeless. So I applaud anyone who's making the tools to make Web3 happen. That is awesome. And giving people options and choice when transacting and building, actually, right? So now getting back into Nomic, you guys consider it an application layer for Bitcoin, which is really interesting because for years we hear, oh, we're Lightning Network, this, that, and the other thing, and different layers that people want to build on. But really, in the news or any kind of chatter in the development world, people are building on Ethereum, right? Because that's how they sold Ethereum, and rightfully so. I think it is that technology that allows you to interact with multiple types of currencies and technologies on their technology stack. How do you think Nomic will elevate the Cosmos? What do you think will happen when this is released and people start to use it and enjoy it?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way I see it is, Cosmos has all this tech that already exists and all these products people have worked on and, all these really cool things you can do, but it's just sort of lacking, you know, uh, inbound new users and new liquidity. It's sort of this ecosystem of only builders and no one else. So there's no, like people have made some really awesome products, but few people have focused on like how do we pull new people into this ecosystem. And the Ethereum ecosystem obviously has so much weight because everyone has MetaMask, and if you're switching to a new ecosystem, it means getting some new wallet. And so the switch to Cosmos, like getting Kepler, there's just not a ton of people doing that. And so but there's so much potential because there's so many really awesome things that have been built. And the way I see it is just making it easy for new people to come in and to bring new value in with them. That's a really important thing. So it makes a lot of sense to visualize Nomic as an on-ramp into Cosmos. And so one really cool feature of Nomic is the interchain deposits. And so if you think about first why centralized exchanges have so many users, those are very easy to use compared to decentralized things. It's because if you have Bitcoin, you want to bring it on some centralized exchange, you just go to the deposit page, you get an address, and you just send to that. It's one step. And as opposed to if you have Bitcoin in your wallet and you're trying to bring it to osmosis in Cosmos, for example, you'd have to send it to an exchange, trade it for some other asset, then send it through some bridge tool. Like it's just like a multiple step process. And so Nomic is aiming to make it really easy to bring all this value into Cosmos by bringing that same centralized experience to the decentralized world. So for instance, you'll be able to go to Osmosis and you just get a deposit address, and you just send your Bitcoin there, and now it's in Osmosis. So I think that's the way to elevate Cosmos, is to just sort of make it easy for new people to come in and to bring Bitcoin. And yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool, and I think it is. You found that white space that we all kind of knew was there, but a lot of people are obviously not paying attention to, except for you guys, or maybe some others. Who knows? But I like the whole translation, like super quick. I think of it as like almost like Google Translate, right? Like you've got Bitcoin, and I want to go here, and right now there's no pull down for the where you're going because you're just going to the Cosmos. Down the road, Matt, I could see you guys kind of having like a pull down in your interface and going, oh, I want to go to this ecosystem or this ecosystem. And Turbofish or Nomic will actually do all the translations for you in one step. That's pretty cool.
So that's one way to think of it, but another way we think of it is it wouldn't even be in our interface. It would be so like it would be kind of invisible, even where you're just on some other chain somewhere and you can just see a Bitcoin deposit address. Maybe it says powered by Nomic, but like you don't even really have to know what that is, or have like you don't have to opt into Nomic in any way. You're really just using it as a tool, sort of as infrastructure.
I got you. And that makes perfect sense because, if you can make the technology disappear, people just use it, right? For the sake of using it. And they don't need to really know who's behind the scenes. I mean, obviously people want to know, but for this type of translation, I think it's pretty cool. And that's the way to go. Just have it seamless. You eliminated one step that could annoy a potential new user. And I do see it in one of the biggest struggles with Web3. We here at Web3 Unpacked talk to everyone, all the founders and creators of a lot of these great protocols. And the number one challenge is onboarding, getting people to take that first step. And that first step is out of their hands sometimes, meaning you have to ask someone to go to an exchange, convert fiat into Bitcoin or Ethereum, then go to so it's this whole onboarding process that that is the core Web3 pain point that I hear literally every day. Um, Now, Matt, I have a question, because this really be very interesting kind of situation. Will or does Nomic have the potential to eliminate exchanges or eliminate the need for exchanges?
I mean, there's so many different use cases for exchanges, but if you mean centralized exchanges, it's definitely, yeah, pushing things towards a direction where, yeah, you don't need these centralized institutions and like central custodians for all these things. So there's always going to be the problem of people who have never touched crypto or Web3 at all and don't have any Bitcoin or anything like that. So there will always have to be some way to get people from fiat into Bitcoin or something like that. But it doesn't have to be this place where, you hold all your funds there and you like pay all these big fees. It really can just be, once people have crypto, then they shouldn't need these centralized exchanges, and there can be decentralized alternatives for everything that you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So you need a place to buy it, obviously. And then from there, you're alleviating a lot of the pressure of having to noodle on whatever exchange you're using, Coinbase or whatever, noodle and convert and flip and do and whatever. Really, really interesting. One of the things we also like to tap into with anything having to do with DeFi or decentralized networks is a bit of security, right? And we've talked to security, Web3 security companies in the past, and there's some elaborate things that they do to verify identities and check the validity of transactions. How does Nomic's decentralized design and emergency dispersal mechanism work? That was really interesting for me, because another thing that's missing with a lot of these Web3 protocols is a sense of security, but emergency funds. What, like, we've seen it a thousand times, literally in the last year, of people, just smaller exchanges and protocols to larger ones, getting burnt.
Right. Yeah. Uh, so we've put so much thought into the design of Nomic, and yeah, obviously security is such a huge priority, and the protocol's designed in a way where the nodes in the network, like we can have a very high threshold of how many nodes in the network have to coordinate for the Bitcoin to move. And that's because, yeah, like you just mentioned, there's this emergency dispersal mechanism. And so all that does is, if there's some issue with the network, then the default is Bitcoin automatically goes back to everyone who holds it on the Bitcoin blockchain without any extra steps. So how it works is, like, just normal usage of Nomic. You might deposit somewhere and your Bitcoin is now held on some Cosmos chain. And if there's some issue, even if the whole network goes down, your funds aren't just lost. They're not stuck in limbo. It'll just be after 2 weeks, like there's a 2 week set interval. The funds will just automatically pay back to everyone who owns them on the Bitcoin blockchain, so that you can just sort of claim it back. And that just makes a really big difference, because first of all, it means, like I was saying, we can have 90%, we require 90% of the nodes to sign, where that would otherwise mean, 10%. What I'm trying to say is only 10% of the network has to behave honestly then for the funds to remain where they should be, like for everything to operate correctly. And that's really good, because, anything else in crypto, it's like you need, a majority of the voting power to be honest. But if you can just get that down, it just makes things so much less risky and so much more secure, where, like, if you just look at the nodes on the network, there's, as long as you believe that 10% out there is going to behave the right way and follow the protocol, then everything will act as you expect. So
All right. So a lot of this is done through voting power, right? Across is it the voting power within Nomic's environment, or is it across the cosmos? I guess it depends. Well, it's the developer community, right? So it's within Nomic, and
yeah,
10% of the.
it's
Go ahead.
within Nomic, but on the roadmap is also adding the Bitcoin hash rate. So the Bitcoin miners and also holders of Bitcoin would be ways to sort of just like increase the amount of security that's powering this. So you'd
Wow,
have to have 90% of all of that combined. And
that's really really interesting. So if and let me get this straight, because I'm new to your guys' protocol and tools. Um, Something happens, one of the protocols on the Cosmos kind of pancakes or does something. Maybe most of the protocols on the Cosmos are pretty legit and solid. I've been talking to many of them, so there's less of a fear there. But if something does happen to one of the protocols and that kind of syncs, how is the end user protected?
so how that would work is it would just be the same as sort of any other IBC asset on Cosmos. And so if I don't think that's something that has really been encountered in the Cosmos world yet. There haven't been any like protocol level rug pulls or anything like that. But even yeah, if like that worst case did happen and like let's say yeah, whole network that's like holding a bunch of Bitcoin went rogue, since it's just a normal IBC asset, we would be able to just go through, have governance sort of deal with that in a way that the community thinks is fair. So that would be
Got you.
recoverable.
Got you. Interesting. And that's, to me, peace of mind. And I think should be celebrated and communicated to end users, because it's kind of it's a big deal. Because when we really look at the environment that you and I are either building on or promoting or speaking about or using, a lot of, we've been around for a while. We kind of know the ins and outs, not your keys, not your coins, that kind of thing. We know a lot of these little pitfalls, the rug pull situations. But what really irritates me these days is a lot of young guys and girls, whoever you are out there, kind of getting pulled, and they're losing their money. And then when they lose their money because of something that they didn't do, it's not about poor investment decisions. The protocol or the exchange, for that matter, is faulty, and then they pay the price. Right? It sounds like the Fed or our government screw ups, and then we pay the price through taxes. But how? I mean, and that's the part that kind of irritates me, is that a lot of young folks are getting hurt here, and any kind of roadblocks that are put in place to prevent that, or kind of checks and balances, if you will, like Nomic does, that's even better, and it's more juice for onboarding some smart investors, younger, smarter investors, quicker. So I love that whole thing. Checks and balances where you can, play fair, no rug pulls, keep the information clear and present for every user. Hyper important, again, because what we're building and communicating for Web3 is trust, right? So always just keep those lines of trust and communication open. Now,
Yeah.
one of the other things I wanted to touch on, we talk a little bit about, is kind of the developer community, right? Because this is near and dear, literally, to your heart and your project. It's near and dear to everyone building or even researching Web3 is the development community, right? And it has changed, right? It's evolved, right? Now you have Tendermint, Rust, Solidity. You've got all of these programming languages that are literally on steroids, you know. Um, it's not your, you know, your basic JavaScript anymore. Um, how how do you see the community? Because I know the community is a big deal for you guys. How do you see it evolving? Can you give us a sense of what your development community looks like geographically, skill sets, anything like that?
Yeah, just the development community in general of, across all these different projects and blockchains. I do think there's a big move towards sort of serious engineering, which is a trend that I really like. Like, I think it sort of started out, there's 2017 when there were all these sort of ICOs happening, all these projects raising a bunch of money just from, like, they hadn't really proven anything yet. They just would say some simple idea of, like, we're going to build this, and they might not have any idea how they're going to build it yet. But so many companies, started from that, and it wasn't clear, like, who was going to really know how to do it and who wasn't. And I think so many, there were so many, like, people with ideas, but without, like, the engineering chops to really pull these things off. And that's why so many of these things have failed. But, there are a lot of things that have succeeded in a big way since then. And like Cosmos, there's so much engineering talent that really made that vision come true. I think just over time, though, there's, like, more and more filtering out of this is just for essentially, like, the lower level parts of the stack, but also, making applications that are, like, really good products. I think there's some amount of filtering out of the, like, the people that are, like, pretending to engineer but not really building anything, and versus, the systems that really can scale to support billions of users and be, the future of what everyone's going to use. And obviously that's just one ingredient. There's also, more serious, people thinking about all the usability and the marketing and all these other parts. But just at least, yeah, what's near and dear to me, what I can tell the difference of, like, where the community, the development community, has gotten more competent is just sort of, the core engineering. And, that's why, there's been a shift from things like Ethereum, where there was sort of less thought into the engineering. Obviously, by now, there's so many smart people that have made all that tech a lot better than how it started, but it still is limited compared to things like Solana and stuff like that. But then Solana, you look at that, and they make a lot of sacrifices on decentralization. And so, there's, like, newer generations, and there's Aptos and things like that, where they can process everything in parallel. I think just, like, over time, the thing that's cool to me is seeing, all the sort of underlying systems for these things just get better and better. And so that's really just one piece of the puzzle, but that is, one part I really like.
Yeah, well said. And one interesting thing that you brought up there, Matt, was core engineering, right? So I see this. I'm not even an engineer or a developer, a little bit in the development world, but nothing like what you guys do, obviously. But there is something interesting there. You wouldn't build a skyscraper, right, and have the interior designers lay the foundation
Right.
or
Yeah.
the plumbing or the aquifers that feed water to the building or the electric. Everyone has what they need to do, and there are people who kind of blend, right, like to your point, blend in and out of different developer roles, and that's okay. It's totally great. But you do need the hardcore engineers that are going to lay the foundation for big beautiful buildings or big
Yeah, that's a really
beautiful
good analogy. Yeah, I like
products.
that.
So you also were talking about the Cosmos as from a developer or an engineer's perspective, and having dipped my toes in and out of the Cosmos with different either clients or different protocols or whatnot, and just my investigation and observation over the past couple of years, especially, is it's a hardy ecosystem. They've been beaten up. That whole Cosmos, that whole ecosystem has been really kind of dinged over the past couple of years. With Terra, I mean, everyone hates that, but that cratered the Cosmos, right? But yet everything, it was bootstraps, all hands on deck. The Cosmos, and I know there were decision makings. I was talking to people when it was happening, that were talking to the founders of Terra. And I was getting reporting, live, and, there was real problem solving going on there by the heads of each, organization within the Cosmos. So I got to hand it to you guys. Hardy, well built. It's proving itself. And what people have to understand is these things are going to happen. Obviously, the rug pulls are extremely unfortunate. And there will be technical glitches. There will be hiccups. This is something that, we're trying to build the most sturdiest bridge we possibly can. But we have to do it fairly quickly, one, to stay competitive, and two, to kind of get the ecosystems filled, right? So it's challenging, and that whole ecosystem has been definitely dinged. But it's really great to see it like flourishing, and I, we keep our eyes on it all the time. Awesome. And the development community is really the heart and soul. The engineering is the heart and soul of it. How many engineers are you pulling in right now? Because I know I work with Web3 recruiters. I often look for Rust developers. It's like, where's that unicorn? It's a small breed. It's a very tight group of folks that have a specific skill set. How do you attract them? What does your development environment look like?
Well, I have an interesting answer for that because just to give some background, like different companies I've worked at over the years in this industry, I've always seen the same issue happen, which is, there's a few founders and they start building something, and then, they raise a bunch of money, and then they hire like too many engineers too quickly before they've really learned how to build the right team, and before they've learned how to manage these people and get all these people to coordinate to build things the right way. It's like if you go from a few people to suddenly you have 30 people solving this problem, then you're going to get a solution that, takes 30 people to understand the solution, and this system that, has 30 big components talking to each other. I think, some of the best work happens from like very small teams where then they can sort of keep everything really coherent, and like there's less issues in the decision making, there's less like loss of information. And so at Turbofish, we've stayed small on purpose, and now we're getting to the point where we are scaling, but we're 3 engineers right now. And what we've accomplished, like we've built this whole stack comparable to the Cosmos SDK, which has, that does have like 30 or more major contributors. And we've built essentially, the same feature set as that, but something that's higher performance, and that it's done in much less code, like using resources really efficiently. It's a lot easier for someone to get in there and understand, and it's less code is important because it means less bugs, and it's faster to build things with less people. And so yeah, at Turbofish, we're just these three people for now. And now we've gotten to the point, though, where we have laid this foundation and we sort of know how we want the shape of all of this to be. And like, we're really happy with all the tools we've built. And yeah, now it's getting to the point where for the first time, I think, it does make sense to start bringing in new engineers that can just sort of follow this foundation that's already laid.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for a little bit of a peek, behind the scenes. It's always good for other developers and other people interested in this space to understand how things work. And you brought up some really good stuff there, Matt. Size of the development team, a bloated development team means you may have bloated architecture and documentation. And
But also
that to
just like
me,
a worse product is how I see it in the end. It's
worst
like,
viable product. um, yeah, yeah. And I think even in the early days, being smart about a smaller and more nimble team allows you to develop a stronger architecture, right? Foundation for everything to be built on top of, right? And I think you're absolutely right. A lot of different applications or protocols will run and start to they get their first round of funding and it's whammo. We've got 50 to 100 developers, which, that might even be too outrageous. But, and it's really not the right approach, right? Core foundational architecture and engineering coupled with really tight documentation will allow you to run faster in the future. So
right, yeah.
that's awesome. And we do, Matt, we do get a lot of listeners who are like, they're engineers. They want to know what they use our podcast to understand or lift the hood on different projects that they may want to contribute to. So it's good. We're getting your word out there as you expand. That's always good news. It seems like you guys are taking the right steps, a very thoughtful approach to developing the product, which is really nice. That's long been gone in Web 2. I'm glad to see it's happening again in Web 3. Um, you know, so yeah, kudos. And, as we wrap up a little bit here, I would say, where are you guys going to do? Because I want to learn more about Turbofish and Nomic and some of your other products, and I know our listeners do too. Are you guys going to hold any special events, maybe X Spaces or Twitter Spaces, anytime soon, or a Discord channel that we can kind of tap into?
Yeah, we do have a Discord. Well, Nomic, the Nomic Discord. I think there's a URL, but the easiest way to get there would just be nomic.io. So that's nomic.io is the website, and uh, then there's also turbofish.org for Turbofish, which is our dev company, and yeah, I think Nomic has a really cool ecosystem that's just starting to grow because we're really just the founders of Nomic, is how we see it. It's like we've just sort of written these initial implementations of Nomic, but really we don't have any special authority over it. We're just the early developers, and we're seeing it grow to this decentralized ecosystem, and it's just really cool to see. So
Yeah, you may have to put a DAO in place to manage your whole thing. So that's really
yeah.
cool. Another thing that I'm very interested in is DAOs and democratizing kind of work environments or
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we're really into
subsidies.
just the core ideas of DAOs as well. Like that's something like like if you look into the future of like what's going to be really impactful for all the things in Web3 being built right now, it's clear that, DAOs are maybe the biggest part of that, because I mean it means, I feel like that term means so many different things to different people, but like as we see real products being made from those ideas, I don't know, DAOs are just really cool. So
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Matt. It's very intricate. The core idea is fairly simple, um, but it does get kind of intricate, and you can use them in so many different ways. I just want to see people. Truly, I want to see it used in government, right? And it's a nice complement to everything that's being done in Web3 right now and beyond, even AI. It's that governance level, and that governance level, you, the the community, help to build those checks and balances and those governance um, scenarios that you want to operate in. Is it complex? Is it layered like the military? Or does it run like a corporate organization, or hopefully maybe not? It runs completely different. The value of votes, within the community, the weight you push, how granular you want to vote, details you want to vote on. It's absolutely fascinating. And I think once organizations like yours and others, small, medium, and large, really get off and Web3 really hits the gas, those things DAOs are absolutely going to be necessary for, I don't want to say not controlling, but wrangling the community and making smart decisions together. Fascinating. Maybe you and I, when you guys get into that, I'd like to have another podcast with you to see how you're structuring it. Because the structure of it, I was looking into it a while ago. About a year ago, I started playing with different DAOs and platforms to really understand how to put something together for my organization. It gets a little, different platforms are easier than others. But you really have to sit down before you even touch a DAO digitally, or start to develop a structure on it. You have to sit down with a pen and paper and just really flow out, like literally wireframe the structure that you want to do, and then propose it to people. It gets really, I chose to just jump in, and I'm like, ooh, oh, you do this, you do that. But you really have to take a step back and kind of get your thoughts together collectively to take the right approach. So we'd love to talk to you more about that for sure.
yeah, we'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt Bell, thank you for joining us. Guys, our listeners, we're going to post all of Matt's and Turbofish's information within the podcast or within the comments in the podcast, and dig in. These guys are exciting. They're doing something. They're bringing BTC directly to end users and the cosmos, and that's pretty exciting. So if you're a developer or anyone interested in this kind of shortcut to different platforms and ecosystems, check them out. I think this is a really cool project. We're going to track you, Matt, and your team. We hope to have more conversations about your protocols and your technology and beyond.
I'm just realizing here a very key thing to talk about that's really exciting of what's happening in Nomic right now is there's a big upgrade planned for like on the 27th is when, October 27th is when the code is all going to be released, and so it activates on the 30th then. And this is sort of what fully brings Bitcoin to the cosmos. Like everything until now has sort of just been the network building up to this point, but now you'll really, on the 30th, you'll be able to, send Bitcoin into the cosmos. So that's the big thing happening right now.
Yeah, good. Any other news you want to bring up, or events, or anything else?
I think that's the main focus. That's what we're all focused on getting out. So
good. So I personally, I'm excited for the 30th. I want to kind of jump on is it a test net or is it actual?
No, this is the real thing. Yeah, this
real
is
deal.
We've had test nets, and
yep.
we have our stake net, which is like there were uh, like Nomic did airdrops and stuff like that, but it's just been sort of this network building up to, the bridge that you'll actually be able to use. So this is the NBTC interchain upgrade, which is what everyone's really been waiting for. And yeah, that's what's coming up on the 30th.
Awesome. Well, we all look forward to that, and we're gonna, give it a shot. We're gonna kind of jump on and try it. Again, let's stay connected and make sure that we have follow-up conversations. We love kind of digging into the nitty-gritty and the details of both developer environments and the technologies behind it, and any kind of protocol or application that helps us, and not just the development community, all of us, do more faster on Web3. So thank you so much, Matt Bell. We will talk soon. And thank you for being a guest here, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich.